Hello. Thanks for joining. We've got Nicole Rivera. Can I call you Rivera? Nicole Rivera?
Yeah, that's fine.
MBA 08, Vice President Global Franchise Planning at Nickelodeon. Thank
Hey,
you for
everybody.
joining us. And good to see you again. And we've got Jason Williams, class of 95, Senior Vice President Global Inclusion Strategy, ViacomCBS, Office of Global Inclusion.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. So let's kick it off. The students sent some questions in advance. They're tough. These students are tough. They are on it. I'm really proud of your questions. So let's dig into, I'm going to ask the students to ask the questions, but I'll kind of tell you, I'll help you out with this. So Anil, let's start with you. You had a question for, let's start with Jason and Nicole with this question. Everybody seems to want to know, what's a day in the life like of your jobs? And I can't imagine every day is the same. So if maybe you could tell us a little bit about your day in the life in terms of, tell us your responsibilities in your roles, a few of them maybe, and kind of how that's evolved during this time. If we could start with that. And I don't know, Jason, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start.
Did you have anything to add to that? I know that was your question.
Oh, no, that was my question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, a day in the life at ViacomCBS, I would tell you that no day is the same. I touch base. Fortunately, I get to see Shelly. I used to sit close by to Shelly on the same floor, and I've known Shelly long before our Duke times, I think from high school, middle school. So it's great that your life before travels to your life in your professional world and beyond. And Nicole, I just had the opportunity to meet for the first time about a year ago. So we've never actually met in person. But the day in the life is typically, my responsibilities really are working with our senior leadership team across the entire ViacomCBS enterprise. So whether that is with the film side, Paramount Studios, or on our CBS Enterprises side, whether it be news and sports, or our entertainment properties at CBS, or with our entertainment group, so MTV Entertainment, our networks group, Nickelodeon, some of the other, Comedy Central, some of the other brands, BET as well. But what I do on a daily basis is, we apply diversity and inclusion across everything we do at ViacomCBS, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera. So I work with the DGA to make sure that we have creative pipeline programs to find the newest and freshest directors. I work with our brand leaders to find out how we can find new partners in production. We call it a supplier diversity program. So production, marketing partners, research partners. I work very closely with our global head of inclusion strategy, who supports our CEO and our board of directors, and something called the Global Inclusion Advisory Committee that stretches across our whole organization. So the typical day, I could be working with external partners, internal partners, today I'm working on a board deck for the board of directors that's due on Monday. So I've got some tough deadlines, reminds me of my Duke days, pulling all-nighters. But it's no day is the same. In the real world, I spend a lot of time between both coasts. So I'm based in New York, and I go out to our Hollywood offices quite a bit. And I have a team that's based here in New York and also based in Los Angeles. And that's really it in a nutshell. I'll pass it over to Nicole.
It's like funny in this Zoom world. You have to like take a moment to unmute yourself and then talk. So hi everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction, Amy. My name is Nicole Rivera. So I'm the VP of Global Franchise Planning within our Consumer Products Division at ViacomCBS, working specifically on our Nickelodeon IPs that make themselves visible on our store shelves. So my job is to create long-range global plans in service of all of our local market teams who are also trying to sell, our products around the world. So I work on brands like SpongeBob SquarePants, Rugrats, influencers like Jojo Siwa, Avatar, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Garfield, Smurfs, etc. So I think Jason definitely summed it up when he said no day at Viacom CBS is the same. And typically when I get asked this question, I like to just basically pull up my calendar and look at what I did today. So today I had about 2 meetings talking about a global fan design challenge that we're looking to launch for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles later this year. I had another meeting about a potential sustainability initiative we're trying to launch against our consumer products. By the way, Shelly, I need some data from you. But anyway, see, I'm getting work done. So working on that. Also working on, the launch of a new consumer storefront in the e-commerce space. And again, just working with my team to create long-range plans. So right now we're in the thick of our planning process, which spans from locking in our plans for the rest of 2021 and going all the way out to 2025 in terms of what we have planned for all of our key franchises. So no day is the same. And that's actually what makes it fun. I think if the days were the same, it'd be pretty boring. But because we work across so many cool IP and there's anything happening at any given time, from location-based experiences to content to consumer products, et cetera, it definitely keeps things interesting. So with that said, I'm going to kick it over to Shelly. But really, Shelly, I need that data.
Thank you. I think, I echo everyone. I'm excited to be here. In terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I really track, report on, and analyze the performance of our entire consumer products portfolio for the domestic US. So what does that mean? I literally track everything we sell across retail for all of the properties across all of the networks. So I spend my days and nights literally paying attention to every product from shows like, Rugrats or SpongeBob, Turtles, tracking items that we sell for JoJo, as well as across in the Paramount world. So I live across all Viacom CBS networks, all categories, all products, all retailers. So to Nicole's point, I spent the day doing 2 things. One, literally talking about the toy industry for at least about 3 or 4 hours of my day today, just trying to understand where we exist in the toy market, where we don't exist, thinking about shows and where we can put products for those shows in those various categories. And then the other portion of my day has been really trying to pull together data to help support the projections efforts. So even just figuring out where Nicole's plans need to go and where we may have opportunities and how I can help support that team with data.
Incredible trio here. I think you guys are basically running the company between the 3 of you. Shelly, can we stick with you for a minute? Paul, raise your hand, Paul. You had a great question for Shelly that was, and I'm just going to ask him just to keep time flowing here. He asked, have you, or let's kind of twist it a bit, what significant change in consumer trends have you noticed since the onset of the pandemic?
I think that that's a really interesting question that I know I've spent for the better part of all of 2020 looking at. So the biggest thing is really the acceleration of adoption in terms of technology. I think that, while a lot of us as young people are constantly streaming, we're constantly streaming content, we're constantly on our phones, whether it's on social media, whether you're constantly Googling for research, et cetera. We've always streamed content. We've always made purchases online, lived our lives in a digital space. the entire world had it. And what happened with the pandemic is everyone went to digital. Everyone from kids, moms, parents, everyone's lives shifted. And that's pretty much the biggest change that we've seen. And it's really impacted our industry because it changes what our consumers are doing. As long as the public is changing, we have to change with it. We have to meet you where you are, whether it's online, whether it's on TV, on air. And we lost one of the channels in which we communicated. When the world shut down, people weren't going to retail. They weren't going into the stores unless it was important. So they were literally living their lives in their homes and in a digital marketplace. And so we had to change how we looked at how we did business, how we communicated with consumers, where we met them, what the content was that we were delivering, and specifically how we can put product in that pathway, right? So what is that path to purchase? It's no longer starting in the store. It really is starting online. It's starting on air. It's the shoppability on social media. All of that changed. And I think that you have more generations that are now shopping online, more generations consuming content online and embedding that in their entire life. And I think it's pretty fascinating. I've even watched my parents just take on more and more technology, ordering groceries, and telling me what's coming up on Netflix. It's very strange, but it's been really fascinating just to see how the adoption of technology has really just escalated so fast.
And that kind of, I guess to go back to what Nicole was saying in her introduction when she kept asking Shelly for her data. Can you tell us a little bit, Nicole, like how Sophia, one of our students here, hey Sophia, had a great question. I think it relates to this, which is how does ViacomCBS consumer products utilize insights and analytics to gain an edge over competitors? So based on what Shelly's been saying and Nicole kind of saying, hey, give me the data. Can you give us a specific example, Nicole, kind of how that would translate?
Yeah, sure. So what's a really interesting example is how we link what's happening in content to sales. So a perfect example of this is Avatar, which was a series that we had back in the 90s and aughts, right? And it was part of our library catalog of content. It honestly didn't do that well on Nickelodeon on the channel when we first launched. But speaking of, kind of technology and people kind of consuming content in different ways, when Avatar launched on Netflix last year, all of a sudden it catapulted to #1 for something insane like 63 days. So this piece of content that was 20 years old all of a sudden was #1 on Netflix. And so what we were doing in the background was kind of analyzing the data, trying to figure out exactly what was the profile of the people that were watching it. We were using Google Trends to understand kind of what people were searching for when they were looking for Avatar. Lo and behold, they were looking for Avatar products. We have products at specialty for Avatar, which is like, you guys probably know, like Spencer's Gifts or Box Lunch or FYE. That's primarily where our Avatar product lives. And those products were all of a sudden selling out. So what we did was we made sure that our Amazon storefront was also ready to go, because we had always had Avatar product on our Amazon storefront, but we didn't really pay much attention to it because nobody really cared about Avatar. So we refurbished our Amazon storefront, brought in a new product assortment, added some video component and some new content. We also had just happened to launch our Avatar YouTube channel at the same time, so we could leverage the YouTube virtual shelf, which actually shows you the product that's available for the content that you're watching. And as a result, and thanks for the numbers, Shelly, the Avatar business has basically doubled in the last year as a result. So we were able to quickly look at the Netflix data, see the wave that was coming, reorganize our e-commerce site, and capture that revenue opportunity.
Wow, well done, team. Jason, question for you. A couple students had a question focused on diversity. Paul and Andy both had a similar question regarding kind of what's diversity look like at ViacomCBS, the vision, initiatives, and what metrics do you use to measure success?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, first I've got to say, across the board, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a bigger focus because of the events of this last year, starting with, the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and others. That has been going on for a while, but in a collective consciousness of us all in this world, the lens and the scope of diversity has broadened. You have a lot of folks that you previously had not leaned in intentionally on diversity have led the charge. So you'll see that what that means for us in our industry and at our company is we continue doing the things that we've always been doing. I came from the global consumer products business. As I said, I used to work very closely with Shelly, but over the last 4 years, I moved over to our global inclusion group. And now we deal with inclusion in all different ways. In the way that we deal with our audiences and the way that we engage with our communities, the content that we put on screen, the content creators that are behind the camera, the writers and directors. We have everyone across our company and across the industry that is intent on making sure that we have a wide diversity of people in front of and behind the camera supporting the effort. So when it comes across the screen to you, whether it's digital or streaming, whether it's going to the movie theater or just watching on good old fashioned TV or Netflix, you are going to be able to see diversity applied in everything we do. And then lastly, I'll say this, we've made a lot of commitments publicly to diversity. And we launched a D&I website a couple of months ago that gave transparency into what our workforce looks like. So and talking about data, Amy, as you asked, we are pretty transparent now about how we stand in terms of gender diversity, racial diversity, particularly in the US, where we stand in terms of the diversity of levels by race and ethnicity and gender, whether it's VP and up or VP and below. And we want to make sure that everyone understands that with this transparency, we're holding ourselves accountable so that when you all graduate and you're looking for the place to go, at a studio or a TV network or as a creative or as an agent, that you're applying that lens of diversity. It's on the front of the mind of everything and everything we do. And fortunately, in this last year, despite the unfortunate circumstances, it seems that we as a global society are all in to make sure that there is a diverse and inclusive way of doing things across the board.
It's kind of speaking of, you said, students who are looking to move on to their, job or internship. I know that might be on some of their minds, seriously on their minds. And I'm curious, I think it was Amy and Andrew who asked this question, which is, kind of what do you look for in new hires? And, as you've heard from these students, they all have these creative projects. This is probably one of many that they're working on. How can they kind of prepare in this pandemic moment to, break into the industry just to get their foot in the door? Any specific tips? And whoever kind of wants to take this first, go for it.
I mean, I guess
Shelley,
I can kind of kick it. I can kind of kick it off and then toss it to Nicole. And so I think that for what I really look for, it really is curiosity and storytelling. Those are the most important things that I look for, especially with regards to my team. I do insights and analytics, but I really do sit in a broader strategy team and a team that does a lot of research. So we're constantly investigating, just what's going on in the market, what's going on in the world, how people are interacting, how their lives are changing. So it's just important for me to talk to a lot of candidates and just see how you tell your story. See what types of questions you ask me. How much have you kind of studied what you want to kind of be your craft, right? So how knowledgeable are you about the way that stories are being told in the world? whether it's commercials, whether it's content, whether it's short form content, whether it's digital. How are you telling me about the things that you're interested in, and how you may be able to tie that into the work that we do or I do? And I think that that pretty much sums up what I try and get out of the conversations. I don't really like to interview. I like to have conversations with people to really kind of figure out where your mind is, how you think, what some of your skill sets are, how well you tell stories, and the questions you ask. I'll talk to Jason or Nicole.
Yeah, so I'd agree with Shelly about the storytelling. I think it's important no matter where you sit, and no matter what your job is. And so on my team, you know, we're responsible for not only just telling stories, but really coming up with kind of innovative ideas, right? To keep, as we call it, super serving the fandom. And in, you know, kind of the interview process that we employ, we actually give a project to, you know, kind of the people that we've whittled down to the final round. And I feel like no matter how many conversations you have, like the rubber really meets the road when you kind of see the story that they're trying to tell, and through fresh eyes, you kind of see how they would build a franchise plan, or how they would speak to consumers. And I think that's just really telling. And I think, you know, it's important to always ask yourself, like the thing that I always say is like, what's the so what? So are you making sure that you're kind of explaining things to people, or making points that haven't already been made, or you're making sure that you're kind of adding context or color to the story that you're telling? And also, are you kind of adding value? I think is the bigger thing too. One of the things that I kind of say to my team is like, if you turn around at the end of every day or month or year, kind of what is it that you have contributed? What is different? Like, what have you kind of shaped or molded? And what contributions have you made that only you could have made? And I think that's true in storytelling as well. So I think, you know, you should always strive to be that person. You should always strive to be that contributor in an organization. And I think that 100% rises above the rest. But Jason, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I'm just to add a different lens. You know, Amy, you're talking about how you can be prepared. I mean, internships, I will say it over and over again, internships, internships, internships. You know, my first internship was, I was so thirsty at Duke to get some exposure. I interned at WTVD right there in Durham. That was my first exposure to television. And then when I went, I spent a couple of years doing consulting, and then I did some independent production on my own, still keeping my foot in the creative world. And then when I went to business school, you know, everybody else was going to work at investment banks and in finance, and I interned at a studio for the summer at Fox TV Studios out in California. Working for no money in the summer in a free internship, but getting an exposure, trying to figure out whether I wanted to go the creative or the business route. So I think one of the best things you can do to prepare is just keep exposing yourself to creative folks that are going to give you good mentorship and guidelines. It sounds like you all have great mentors already through StudioDuke. I heard someone mention Rob Chavis, a good friend of mine, a fraternity brother from Duke, who I know has been practicing his craft for many years. He started as a lawyer and then went on to become a writer. So in this most succinct way, I would say internships, and like one of my favorite movies, Glengarry again, Glenn Ross, where they say, always be closing, always be pitching. Always have your pitch ready. The exercise that Amy gave you at the beginning about having a very quick and succinct pitch is the best advice she could give, because you know what Shelly and Nicole are doing and their franchise planning and turning consumer products from TV shows into consumer products. People are coming in and they're pitching. When I work with the emerging directors that I work with, emerging female and people of color directors, they're always pitching and they've got new shows. So when they go on set and they shadow on our different networks, they're ready. So when someone says, are you ready to be a director or a writer? They have their pitches ready. They have it ready in a 30-second succinct way. So that's the best advice I could give. even if you're not creative, even if you're a business person like myself, you're always going to have your foot in the creative world if you're working in this industry.
I'll tell Rob you said hello, Mr. Williams.
I will. All right. Tell him I said, yo, yo, Kappa Alpha Psi.
You got it.
Got it.
Thanks. Great advice, y'all. That kind of maybe leads to kind of, I guess, a turn back into another question that came up pretty much with all the students, which was asking about the merger of ViacomCBS. And Shelly, I'd love to see your thoughts on a question that Andy asked, which was, and also Andres mentioned this too, just with so many different networks under ViacomCBS, so many different brands, how do you manage all of them, when they differ in terms of audience, content, and popularity?
Yeah, I saw that question and I was like, wow, it really had a huge impact because my portfolio just literally quadrupled. When I first started off, I was really solely focused on Nickelodeon, so really kind of kids and family. And then upon the merger, I blinked and I am now looking at products for not only just Nickelodeon, but BET. We're looking at MTV. We're looking at Paramount Pictures. So that goes even deeper because you're talking about classic films like The Godfather. You're talking about Top Gun. You're talking about Clueless. And it's really just trying to figure out, yes, how do you keep up with that audience, who that core audience is? How do you keep up with what the storylines are? Are we going to evolve that when we anniversary it? And if so, will the products need to change? And, honestly, it's really just a matter of constantly pulling yourself aside and focusing on that group or that, that content and who those characters are, what they need, what they want, and how do they resonate with consumers. I literally just have to constantly manage myself and focus. So sometimes I split up my day and I'm working specifically on a certain demographic or portfolio for that day. And then the next day I'll kind of switch up. So I'm constantly rotating through the consumers or the perspective that I need to take on looking at the business. So it is very difficult, but I also think it makes it very fun because nothing is the same. You're constantly, living a different life kind of each day and addressing different challenges and issues depending on whatever that project or content is.
Any thoughts to add to that, Jason, Nicole, in terms of the merger and your day-to-day?
Yeah, I'll be really quick about this. This is, it's been a year since our companies merged, Viacom and CBS, and we have 21 plus brands, and I rattled off a few of them earlier, but there's such a wide diversity across, whether it's news, which is live and fresh every day, and sports, which is timely. We're broadcasting the Super Bowl on Sunday on CBS, to longer tail franchises that are at Paramount, older franchises like Shelly mentioned, Godfather, but as you can see, it's being refreshed. So we have such a large diversity and large portfolio, but you have to approach, there's no one size fits all approach. And as you've seen, we're all pivoting to streaming. And what we've all done is our jobs have shifted because of the pandemic, as the nature of everyone's jobs, the way that we serve our audiences and serve our content has shifted, the way people consume. So very quickly, we're adapting across 21 plus different brands, ranging from comedy to high drama to reality, unscripted to movie franchises, and making sure that the content is fresh, that we're mining for the intellectual property that we have in-house, and that we're getting the most out of that content across all platforms. So it is a challenge. I might find myself on one day talking to someone from Paramount and then talking to someone from Comedy Central or BET later on that day. But we're all driving towards content and consumer products and making sure our audiences are seeing authenticity in the content we put out there and the products that we buy, that we sell and that they buy. So yeah, it's a challenge, but we manage it. It's just like managing your classes, you know, making sure that you get to that 4.0.
Anything to add, Nicole?
No, I agree. I think the biggest change for me is now kind of looking at this new platform that's CBS All Access, soon to become Paramount Plus, and watching kind of the franchises that I'm used to just living on Nickelodeon, now kind of living on these new platforms and learning how to kind of push and pull in terms of our consumer communication between the two. So it's been really fun kind of learning about the world of streaming and kind of considering how we expand our reach as a franchise. So it's great.
It sounds like you guys need some new hires, all that extra work. Well, speaking of kind of just, you know, that's another question that came up. And I think, you know, you talked about All Access or Paramount Plus, CBS All Access, Paramount Plus. What are there some, you know, areas that you think, hey, you know, for those seniors that are graduating and thinking, hey, how can I get my foot in the door? Are there certain, you know, parts of your company or verticals that you'd say, hey, check this one out, or, you know, this is something where they're going to be launching or they're going to be growing?
Yeah, I can say that really quickly. It's great to see that, Amy, this program that you've started, because when I was an undergrad in the mid 90s, there really was no arts focused or entertainment focused or creative media or visual arts. So you really had to seek that out through, I think it was Duke TV, you know, that was basically it. I think that everyone who is interested in working in this industry or at ViacomCBS, you know, I can speak for myself, just seek us out. We're, as Amy will tell you, we're always supporting all of our fellow Blue Devils to make sure that they have the opportunities to get their foot in the door. And it sounds like a lot of you are constantly preparing for that opportunity. So reach out, you know, through LinkedIn, through the alumni network, you know, have, you know, really your story and your pitch ready. If you're still a junior or a senior, a rising junior or entering your senior year, go look at the ViacomCBS careers and internship program. We have a really great internship program that allows people to go into a bunch of different brands. And if you're a law student, you can do internships in law. If you're an MBA student, same. If you're coming from undergrad and you're creatively focused, there are some creative and focused internships, as well as those in marketing and consumer products and all the areas that Nicole and Shelly touch. So just reach out to us. That's what we're here for. I think we're all 100% invested in making sure you know, that we remain, that Harvard remains the Duke of the North.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's very generous. So, you know, I hope students, you guys take Jason up on that, and if Nicole and Shelly are up for that too, no pressure. That is amazing, just to know that they can reach out to you all. You know, in the kind of moments we have left too, another question that came up is just, you know, what can they do in this moment now as students to just, you know, take advantage? I mean, it's in this pandemic moment, you know, there are obvious restrictions, but any tips, you know, specifically on, you mentioned developing the relationships, but just other things that you would look for in terms of, you know, classes or skills, etc., that they can gain, that maybe they wouldn't have thought of before, that maybe you didn't realize, you know, looking back, that would have been nice to have. Anything come to mind in terms of those types of things?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, there are things that we like to do, but they are, you know, and there are things that are easy to do. And then there are things that we hate to do, but they're good for us, like taking vitamins and such. And so what I'd say is, what I continue to find throughout my life, and by the way, you guys, like I have a Bachelor of Music, so I'm just gonna walk with you here for a second. I hate numbers. Shelly's probably shocked. Despise numbers. And I used to be really fearful of contracts. So my first job out of school was actually to be a contract administrator at Universal Records. And now I'm obsessed with Excel spreadsheets. So what I would say is like, whatever that thing is you're afraid of, you should conquer in this time of COVID. Just like, if there's anything you're bad at, like embrace it and just like figure it out. But specific to contracts and numbers, what I found when I worked at Universal was there were a lot of recording artists, right, who were just kind of pursuing their passions, right? But they didn't necessarily know about the business side of things. Learn the business side of things. Whatever field you're going into, learn the business side of things. The creative side is wonderful, but always know your business. And so what I mean by that is there were artists who had 65-page recording agreements, but had no idea that they had signed away the rights to all their royalties because they didn't like to read recording contracts, or they didn't have people who, you know, were in their corner. Or there were artists that would call me up and basically ask me where their royalty check was, and they didn't realize that like there was somebody else who had, you know, who had access to their money. So I would just say numbers and contracts, learn them. That's very, in the most simplistic of terms.
That's great advice. Shelly, did you want to add to that? You're
No, I wholeheartedly agree with leaning into numbers and data. I think one of the most interesting things that I got a chance to work on internally for our organization was some research we were doing with multicultural research that really was leaning into how kids view race and culture in the world today. And we actually started it before all of the Black Lives Matter movements, et cetera. And it's been interesting to see how this quantifiable and qualitative research, which includes a lot of data behind it, is being used now to help drive content and storylines and all of that. So to Nicole's point, it's a different way of approaching concepts, ideas, you know, and content ideas, and just some of the different show ideas. And it's really been driven by data and research that we've been actually having inside. And most people really are scared of the numbers and research. But it's really interesting to see a lot of the interns and new hires really lean into just learning new ways and methods of research so that we can use that to develop characters, so we can develop storylines, as well as the merchandisability of the content. So I agree.
Yeah, and Shelly hit the nail on the head with, you know, all of you spoke about these great projects that you have, documentaries and pitches and shows, but, you know, to Nicole's point, having the business in mind, as you're creating your, you know, creativity is one thing, but as you're creating something, you always have to think, is there a market for it? Will someone buy it? Will this script ever get optioned? Will it sit on the shelf? So you've got to do your homework, understand the business, understand the marketability and sellability of the projects you create, because it's your blood, sweat, and tears. But ultimately, if you walk, the first time you walk into an agent's office, or I was surprised the first time I walked onto a studio lot and I saw the head of the TV studio, and he had a wall full of scripts, literally 8 feet high, 15 feet wide, all of them just sitting there. And that was blood, sweat, and tears from every one of those people that spent nights on a typewriter or a computer at the time, a typewriter then, computer now. And so you have to think about it, about the marketability of what you're doing before you spend any amount of time on it. I don't say let the business drive and override the creative, but I think you have to have the end result in mind. So understand your market, understand the product, understand its marketability and sellability, and then dive in and be a creative and get a good business manager and agent. And that's what they're for.
Yeah, that's a whole other question, how to get the agent. But that's a whole other episode. And also Chris just got an agent in our cohort, so maybe he can help us out with that too. And a lot of your mentors are agents. So I feel like we're making progress in that direction, but that's really helpful, specific tips. Okay, so you talked about the, you know, marketability, profitability. There's a real heavy hitting question from Aaron Zhao. What's your favorite CBS show? Who wants to take that?
I'll be really quick. The Good Fight. You've got to see it on CBS All Access, and it'll be on Paramount Plus. It's sharpest, one of the sharpest shows out there. I love it.
I mean, I love the stuff I work on. So my favorite is SpongeBob SquarePants. It's not a CBS show, but it's a ViacomCBS show.
I'm similar, and I even wrote in my notes back to you, Amy. I'm not sure how to answer this. There are so many shows in our portfolio that I really love. From SpongeBob, I love Rugrats. Super excited about the future of Rugrats. I can't tell you how excited I am about that. But I also love some of our other just general content, whether it's the NCIS shows, SEAL Team, a little bit of action. So I'm a little more all over.
All good stuff. Thank you. So you're all based in New York primarily, and just in the moments we have left, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, you got to be in New York, you got to be in LA," and then other people say, "It doesn't matter," especially in a pandemic, doesn't matter. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Especially, people thinking about in this Zoom here, what to do this summer, what to do when they graduate, where to live. Any thoughts as far as kind of advantages or tips, or you know you gave us so many great tips and stuff, but I'm just curious in terms of kind of their location. Is that really, you think, being in New York place to be? What do you think?
Yeah. At some point, you're going to. It is different in the pandemic. You can work from anywhere, but no matter what, when we return to whatever the new normal is, this is an industry unlike any other, where it is built on relationships, and being able to be in New York or Los Angeles is an advantage. But there are other markets. I mean, there are Texas and Chicago, and there are film festivals everywhere. You can still tap in, but if you're going to really be in the hub of where, like I mentioned, agents and managers are, or the headquarters of the businesses that are, whether it's the record industry, the music industry, or the film or TV industry, it's still, at least here in the US, still based primarily in New York or LA. Atlanta is becoming a very big hub with a lot of production there. And I think a lot of people are finding success there, and they can balance the standard of living versus the high cost of being in LA and New York, and especially when you're starting out. So that might be a good piece of inside advice that you, as coming graduates who will be coming out soon, might want to consider. But in the New York and LA still are paramount.
Yeah, and I would just add to that wholeheartedly agree, especially looking at places like in Atlanta, which is a little more up and coming. But take advantage of the fact that right now you don't have to be on site, right? So take advantage of the fact that you can kind of extend yourself into locations that you may not necessarily want to end up completely, but at least to establish yourself and grow your network there, so you can kind of build. And doing as many informational interviews across the US as you possibly can, just to meet more people and grow that network.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I have anything else to really add. I mean, it's just, I would just take advantage of this virtual world. Like, the world is actually smaller now. So use that to your advantage, talk to everybody while people are, kind of idle and willing to chat virtually before they're kind of off and running around and on planes like Jason again. But yeah, I would highly recommend that.
And just quickly, when you say reach out and the virtual world, that we have so many platforms for outreach. What's your advice in terms of kind of, do you like to receive emails, LinkedIn? What have you found to be most successful way to just kind of do that intro? And all of you have about 25,000 jobs, it sounds like. So just what has been successful? What would you recommend that they do in terms of outreach?
Yeah, I'll say I have a tendency, specifically, if someone reaches out to me and says that they're at Duke, I know someone from the Duke Arts program before I was even StudioDuke program, before I was familiar, reached out through LinkedIn. And I'll always, even if it takes me a couple of months, I'll always try to set some time aside to talk to them and give them some direction, because people really did that for me. And just as a quick nugget, I'll make it quick. I had a meeting with someone when I was an unpaid intern in 2003, living in LA, interning at Fox Studios for the summer. I sat in her office once and for 45 minutes. And 2 weeks ago, I was on a conference call and she popped up. She's running our NAACP and CBS Entertainment Studios partnership. And I was on a big call with her and she said, I know you from somewhere. And I said, you know what? I know you as well. I sat in your office about 15 years ago, and you talked to me about, what you do as a creative, and that really kept me going through the summer. So people have given me the time, and so I paint it forward and making sure especially for our Duke alums, to make sure that everyone is prepared and has access. So that's my take.
Yeah, and I just agree. It's I feel free to email. I think email really is the fastest way to connect. LinkedIn is great too. Do not be shy about being persistent. I'm normally pretty straightforward in telling someone quickly, I see it. I see you went to Duke. This is exciting. I want to connect. If I'm crazy busy, I may say, hey, can we hop on a call for maybe 15 minutes? Just to kind of get a sense of you and to touch base and figure out, honestly, if I can help you, or maybe there's someone else that I want to send you to. What I have found to be amazing about the Duke network really is how pay it forward it is. I know everyone that I know at Duke is willing to say, hey, we had a great conversation. You should talk to this person. So I think you just have to get out there, talk to as many people as possible, and don't be afraid to be persistent if you don't hear back from someone.
Yeah, agree on all those fronts. Everyone send emails, everyone link in. I promise if you want to talk, we will talk. And I, always pay it forward because that's what we should do. And when you're somewhere else, you need to make sure that you pay it forward as well. But always happy to chat.
Thanks, y'all. I just took a couple screenshots so in 15 years you can remember who was around this Zoom. And, remember this moment as you did. That's a really powerful story, Jason. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks to you all for just making the time to be with us and to, look out for each other as Dukies and, well, just in humans in general. So thank you. I can only imagine the things you've got going on. So let's just do a round of Zoom applause, if that's a thing. A lot of love for y'all. Anything that I left out that you had to ask before we close? Jason, Nicole, Shelly, anything that you want to?
Thanks for having us join. It's an honor to talk to these future creatives and power people who are going to be running the media and entertainment industry down the road. So stay in touch.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Be safe, be well, and hopefully get some R&R this weekend. And I will say go Chiefs just because that's my hometown. So
Good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Students, we're going to stick around and have a couple presentations. Cool. Let's start.